maybe clay was there, and I'd done a bit at school, tiny bit at school before
Fine.
I gave up art forever.
Yeah.
You know, I'd done like 3 weeks and made a few pots.
Right.
And
Before I gave up art forever.
well, yeah. Haha.
Exactly.
Careful what you say.
Welcome back to Artfully Crafted. My name is Alienor, and each week I travel to a craft person's studio, interview them and show you their work. This week we are going to Camberwell to meet Chris Keenan, who's a potter. I got to visit Chris' studio a few months ago and loved the precision of his work, which looks pretty deceptively simple, yet definitely isn't. And you really feel the influence of Japanese aesthetics, which I really love. Chris's prototypes for the Sora collection that he designed for Habitat were acquired by the V&A for their permanent collection, and his work can be found in 8 other public collections in the UK and Japan.
Hi, Chris.
Hello, Eleanor.
Thank you so much for having me here. We're in your lovely studio.
Yep, we are. Yep.
In where you've been for how long?
Oh, I've been on the yard since 1995, and I've been in this studio since the end of 1998.
That's awesome.
A long, long time.
That's really cool, though.
Yeah.
'Cause I feel like, you know, I guess the story of studios around London is often people are kind of moving around a lot, so it's really special that you've been able to.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of,
one space.
I learnt here, and the idea of leaving it when I came to get my own studio was a bit, I didn't want to go too far. But I was able to get this studio at the end of, so a year after my apprenticeship finished, I got this space and I've been here. And the landlord was brilliant. He let me have the space at half rent for a year because
so
he
good.
said that, you know, you'll need to share it because of the size. I wanted somewhere smaller. He said, you'll need to share it, and finding the person you want to share your studio space with in all sorts of ways takes a while. So have a year at half rent, which I thought was incredibly, what's the word? It's very...
Generous.
Philanthropic, yeah.
Yes,
Very philanthropic. He
yeah.
understood.
Yeah.
He got it, which was great.
You would hope that landlords of artist spaces would be those kinds of people who are in it partly to nurture.
Supportive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
But shall we kick things off properly
Let's.
with you telling us a little bit about, well, no, not a little bit, a lot.
Okay.
About who you are,
Yep,
your practice,
yep.
and what you make and how you make it.
Okay. I'm Chris Keenan. I'm a potter. And I throw on the wheel. I throw and I turn. And I use a limited palette of glazes. The clay I use is porcelain. I use Limoges porcelain. It's the clay I was taught to throw with, because when I started, I really didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I could make. I was just shifting direction. And the person who taught me said, you know, you're going to find it hard enough to learn to throw anyway. And if I start you with porcelain, then we don't have to worry about contamination between clays. Mm-hmm. So porcelain it was to start, and porcelain's remained for the nearly 30 years I've been making. Throwing, turning, all happens here on this wheel. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of, I get better. One of the things I really enjoy about what I do is that I don't feel I've reached peak pot yet. You know, I think technically I improve. And early on, it was sort of like you shifted through the gears of first gear, second gear, third gear. And I don't know what gear I'm at now, but it's still, you still have those moments of change where you go, okay, the clay's flowing a little bit more easily. And that hand gesture there is obviously me miming throwing on the wheel. You know, it's sort of, it's like having a carrot dangling in front of me, and the work pulls me forward. Mm-hmm. And everything I make will do a job if you want it to. And the lexicon of forms I've been making pretty much since I started, things you can drink out of, things you can put flowers in, things that will sit on a shelf if you want them to. You know, all of those things I regard as function. So, you know, the functional does not have to mean that it's constantly in use. I've got things on my shelves that I think are beautiful, and their function is to please me with their beauty. And that's, you know, that's a great thing. Very happy to have that in my life.
Absolutely. You mentioned Limoges porcelain. So does that mean it actually...
Limoges, yes, indeed, yes. Sorry, I call it Limoges. Limoges, yeah, that's what I use.
I'm going to come across as
No, you're not. No, I love it. It's great. It's great.
I'm French.
No,
and I'm
I
telling you how to
know,
pronounce it. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
But how can you not?
But so does that mean it? I mean,
It's French. It comes from Imeries. Imeries is the manufacturer, and that's where I'll stop talking about it because I get it.
Yeah.
You know, it comes in a bag, 20-kilo bag. I wedge it up and I use it.
Yeah. No, that's
And there
good
are
because
two
I mean,
types.
Limoges porcelain is obviously it's
Yeah,
a thing.
it's a thing.
But I didn't realise that it was a thing in so much, you know, because I just know about the Limoges like manufacturer,
Yes,
and et cetera,
yes.
but I didn't realise it was actually like a type of porcelain that other potters.
Yeah, lots of types
You
of
know,
porcelain.
use.
You've got something called Audrey Blackman, Harry Fraser, Royale, Southern Ice, and Limoges, and other ones as well. You know, it's a recipe. I don't know. It might be dug out of the ground. I can't remember.
That's
You know,
fine.
my knowledge is on a need-to-know basis, really, and it comes in the bags. You know, I don't dig it up locally. I'm afraid it's sort of a.
That's okay. So you get the porcelain.
Yep.
And then you throw.
Yep.
And then, so what's the process from
The
there?
process, so you throw, basically I do small batch production, and so I will sort of make 20 of something. If it's a mug, I'll make as many mugs as I can get on a 4-foot long board, which is in a session, and that's about 24, something like that. And then you have to allow it to dry until it's what we call leather hard, and at that point I can start to remove the clay from the outside of the piece to get the shape that I want. And the thing that took me a long time to really fully grasp was that when you're making, you don't want to be looking at the outside all the time. It's the internal profile which is the most important thing. Because if you throw the internal profile correctly, as you want it, then when you remove the clay to the shape, to follow the inside shape, you'll then have something which has balance and weight. Because I think, you know, with pots, you're looking at them and you're in silent conversation with them. And then when you pick it up, the conversation deepens. And you can either go, oh, it's a bit heavier than I thought it would be. And then you ask more questions of yourself. Or it's very light. You know, it's sort of, there's an interaction that happens visually, but when you get to hold it, there's a whole other dimension comes in, literally another dimension comes in. And so, yeah, the interior profile is sort of, if I'm teaching, it's what I really try and get across is that that's what's important. Because I used to, you know, I was seduced by the outside of things when I was just starting. You go, oh, I like that shape. Oh, that's a nice shape. And you go, oh, I keep that shape, but not realizing that what was inside was wrong or not good enough. And so it was really heavy because, you know, it takes a long time. You know, when I was learning, it was 5 days a week, full days. You know, it's not something you pick up. It's very hard. I think it's very hard for people who are doing it as an adult education thing to a 3-hour class, and you come back next week and have another 3-hour class. It's very difficult because you've wrapped it up, and so it's not shifted. You know, you have to nurse it. There's a constant nursing that has to go along, and if you put a handle on something, then you need to wrap it up so that the handle and the pot equalize in terms of dryness. You know, you can be caught out, and porcelain can be a bit of a rogue master. You know, it has plastic memory. So if you try and alter it, shift it back, it can go, in the kiln, I'll remember that.
Oh.
You know, so it's sort of, you can be bitten on the behind sometimes by things, you know, that resurface later down the line. You think you've sorted it, but you haven't. You know.
Yeah, so like...
Hard taskmaster, really.
Yeah, but it's like the human body remembers things.
Oh,
remembers
yeah,
shocks,
oh my God.
So
Oh,
we're saying
yeah.
the porcelain is the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I'm going to put this in now. A friend of mine said to me, she said, where do you store your shit? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, where in your body does the difficult stuff in your head go?
Right.
Where does it sit? And I thought, it sits in my back. It sat in my lower back for years. It doesn't sit there anymore.
Okay.
It's sort of dissipated a bit, but it's really, you know, and she was an American, so, you know, therapy was much more
part of
I
that
think,
conversation.
yeah.
And so, okay, so you throw and then it rests.
And then I
you
turn. Yep.
And then, so where, so then you kind of refine the outside shape.
Yep,
basically.
absolutely. Yep.
And so where do you go from there? You mentioned that you work only in a couple of glazes, is that right?
Yeah. So once you've got the shape and you're going to let it dry, then if it's got a handle on, it's got to be wrapped up. If it's not got a handle on, you can just let it just dry in the atmosphere. And of course, in the winter, it takes longer to dry. In the summer, it's much quicker. In the summer, you can put it outside in the sun and turn it later that day. So you have a pot from a lump of clay ends up the day being a pot. But in the winter, it can take 3 days for things to dry. So once it's dry, you then pack a kiln, and I use an electric kiln to do my biscuit firing. So that's when you take it to 1,000 degrees. And when it's had a biscuit firing, then you can glaze it because it's still absorbent, but it has structurally much more soundness. And I use a couple of glazes. I use a very dark, they're both oriental glazes, both over 1,000 years old. I use a tenmaku, which is like a dark mirror black brown, and a celadon, which is a pale blue, very lively blue, but quite pale. And I first used those on a project I was set during my apprenticeship to make an espresso set or a tea or coffee set. And we've got relatives in Sicily, and they have saucerless cups, ceramic tray, and a covered sugar bowl. And that was the project. And I thought my idea was that with the little espresso cup, if it's dark on the outside and light on the inside, when it's full of coffee, it'll just be dark. But when you drink the coffee, you get the surprise of the pale blue interior. So those were the first two glazes, and I use them underneath each other, on top of each other, and that gives you different effects. But it's always been fairly limited as a palette. I now have 4.
Right.
So 2 were around for about 15 years, and in the past 10 years, there's been a bit of green, which is a mixture of the tenmaku and celadon from my waste when I'm cleaning them up before they go in the kiln. And the other one is a commercial glaze. So that's just basically, I mix my glazes from the raw materials to a recipe. Commercial glazes just add water.
Right.
Which is amazing. And, I'm finding that this particular glaze very, it's really adding something to the work.
So really restrained, deliberate.
Yes,
palette.
yeah. It's that thing about, I think sort of when I started, I knew that if I was okay at it, it would be how I wanted to make my living. And I think there were decisions which I couldn't analyse at the time, but subsequently go, that's why I made that decision. You make decisions quite quickly so that you move forward. Whereas if I'd said, I want to learn how to coil, I want to learn how to slab build, I knew that I wanted to throw. That was what interested me. I liked the thrown pot. Because I knew very little about clay anyway. It's sort of the thrown pot was the thing that pulled me in.
So you've just briefly mentioned that you did an apprenticeship. That's
Yep.
kind of piqued my curiosity a bit.
Okay.
Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So before I made pots, I was an actor. That's what I'd wanted to do as a teenager. I did school plays. I went and did a drama degree. I did a postgrad acting course, and I got my equity card. I worked as an actor for about 12 years.
Oh gosh, okay. You weren't like dabbling in a career.
No. It was what I wanted,
Yeah.
and I did theatre. I did bits of telly. Nothing amazing. I did some commercials which gave me money, And one year, 1989, I did my first well-paid commercial. It was a series of 3 commercials for Ronseal. And I was working for a theatre company in Sheffield, and the guy in the company was, he shared a house. He was the lodger of a potter. So when I went to visit my friend Mark once, I met a potter, and there was this tall southerner in Sheffield, and that young man was Edmund de Waal. And so I met Edmund, and because I had some money, I thought I want to buy some pots. So I bought a few pots, one of which is in the studio actually, and so I did that, and I really enjoyed it. Those pots became important to me over time, and we stayed in touch, and we would buy them for presents for people. I bought them for my partner, she bought them for me, so we amassed a little collection of them. And I had a year as an actor where I did one day's work, and I thought, I think there's got to be more than just sitting around waiting for work. And doing a day on a telly or something like that it's not very satisfying, because
that's tough.
You go in, hit your mark, do it, and go. Yeah. There was no sort of development of that skill, and so Edmund moved to London, and he had a show. He did a thing called Chelsea Craft Fair for the first time in 1994, and we went to see him. Went with the friend Mark and his partner Barbara, and we went to see him at the fair, and he was doing really well. It was good, It was positive for him, and so he then had a show at his house, and we went to that, and Susie, my partner, was talking to him, and he mentioned that he was thinking about taking on an apprentice, and that was like a light going on in my head, and I thought, right, I've got to write to him.
So I'm intrigued by something here, because I feel like you're looking at it now as the sort of
hindsight, 2020 hindsight.
And so you're like, oh, it makes sense that I wrote to him. It makes sense that I bought pots from him. But I mean, were you an art collector? Had you bought art before? Like, was there something about pottery that you'd been thinking about, or was it literally just you met him, you knew him? What was it that first connection that?
I suppose I met him and I saw the pottery that he had at the back of his house in this building that was built on the back, which was built for the people who built the streets. So it was sort of like, it was a fantastic location for pottery. And I liked the pots. And I suppose I sort of had some money to spend.
Right, so
it was literally sort of like I acquired, but without any knowledge that it would be. I suppose when I was a kid or teenager, if we went on holiday, I bought some pretty horrible pots.
Okay.
Just small ones, very small ones, but things that got broken across the years. So maybe clay was there, and I'd done a bit at school, tiny bit at school before I gave up art forever. Yeah. I'd done like 3 weeks and made a few pots.
Right.
And
before I gave up art forever.
Well, yeah. Exactly. Careful what you say, Well, I was, it was sort of like I couldn't, I was told I couldn't draw and things like that. So it's, standard, classic, but I did carry on making things. I'd always made things. So I cook, which I think is making. Yeah. I've done DIY. To a standard, not fantastic. I've made clothes, which is about following a pattern. So all of those things are about process of raw material to finished thing. Fine. Yeah. So that when I wrote to him, that's what I emphasised. I said I didn't know, it was a letter expressing interest in the possibility of fulfilling the role of being an apprentice for him. Yeah,
but that you were drawing on. You'd always had that interest in pots, and you had also had that interest of process, as you say. Yeah. So it wasn't, it's not out of the blue.
No, it's not completely out of the blue, but the idea of the attractiveness of being taught to make pots by Edmund was, it was sort of one of those things that just blew in. Yeah. And settled. Mm. And I was really lucky that when we met to talk about the letter and to discuss the possibility of it in a pie and mash shop in Woolwich.
I love that.
We talked and he said yes.
How long was that conversation?
It was a lunchtime conversation, so I suppose about an hour.
Yeah.
You know.
So funny. I mean, that's such a
I was sort of, hello. it's sort of
like,
a very naive, and I'm older than him, but I tell you what, it was the idea of learning again.
That excited you, and that fits in with what you were saying, that you felt like you weren't learning as an actor anymore, right?
I mean, the thing is, I come here every day, and that's what every day, 5 days a week. By doing it, I get better. As an actor, you can't get better if you're not doing it. This is sort of, so I'm very lucky. I'm very fortunate, And so I started an apprenticeship with him. And
what was that apprenticeship?
So it was a 5-day week.
Okay.
He said, you'll be in from 9 to 5, basically. Yeah. And that was the January we met in the pie mash shop. And then he said, I'll take you on in October. So I had like 9-10 months. And so I was working as a waiter by this point because all my commercials money had run out. So I had to have a job. So I was working as a waiter in Waterloo, and I squirreled away all my tips to make a fund because I knew I wouldn't be able to work as much when I started my 5 days a week. So when I started with him, I went down to two evenings a week working as a waiter. So that's how I got through it with the tips that I'd squirreled away. And
may I ask, how old were you when that?
I was 30. I started my apprenticeship when I was 35.
That's quite a bold, brave move.
That's it's really interesting because I think for me it never struck me as being bold or brave. It struck me as being absolutely necessary to put my focus in another direction, to try and find another way to live a life with an occupation. It's sort of, because people say very bold. Do we working in the city? And I went, no, I swapped in secure income streams. Basically. Because there's no guarantee. I'm not on a salary now. No freelance person is. As you know. It's sort of but this is so much better.
And so so then you went down to working 2 days a week.
Yep, and so 2 evenings a week in the restaurant, and basically I started, and he had me throwing cylinders with porcelain, a pound of clay, and that's how I start when I teach. It's a real, it gives you a sense of what somebody's capable of. If they can throw a cylinder, you go, yep, you know how to control clay because the clay wants to go like that. So if you can keep it like this, that's great. That indicates something. And my cylinders were rubbish. Of course they were that high, and they had bases that thick and bases that thick. It's sort of, I was a beginner. I was a real beginner. And I'll say this now, one of the things that I think about my apprenticeship is, it's just me. So I had nobody to compare myself with. And subsequent to the apprenticeship finishing, one of the things I realized was, I thought it was really skillful. And I don't know how conscious it was on Edmund's part, but I never felt like I was ahead of myself in terms of progress, and I never felt I was really bad. He made each point I was at in terms of development a comfortable place to be.
That's a real skill as a teacher.
I think so, yeah, absolutely. And he sent me projects, and I glazed his work, and of course glazing someone's work means you're holding it a bisque, so you get to know about these things about balance that I was saying about. You get to know, and our wheels were side by side for 2 years, and he would throw something, and I'd go, oh, that's beautiful, that's fantastic, and then he'd turn it, I went, oh, okay, oh, that was inside. It's like something's been taken away and suddenly the pot is there in a different sense.
So again, he was focusing on the inside.
Absolutely,
and then he would
absolutely.
It.
Yeah. And that, so little by little, and, we went through the forms, cups, jugs, bowls, beakers, teapots, right towards the end, because that's quite a complex thing. And, one of the other things about being in a working studio, and Edmund shared his studio when I started with him. They came to Vanguard Court. It was next door where I learnt, and he and Julian Stair took on the studio together. And then Julian had an apprentice subsequent to me being there. And watching these two potters who were, yeah, Edmund was on the ride. Julian sort of had a stronger reputation at that when they first started sharing together. To see them dealing with galleries, with customers, was another side to the education as well as the making. And that's crucial if you want to make a job of it and make a career of it. You need to know how these things work. And so incredibly generous. Edmund always told people who came to the studio, this is my apprentice Chris and this is his work. And sometimes I sold the odd piece, you know.
Amazing.
And I had to have my first open studio at the end of the first year. He said, you can't, you know, if you want to make this work, you've got to show it to people. It's got to get out, excuse me, it's got to get out in front of the world. So I did that. And, you know, and as an actor, all I had to have was my photograph taken every couple of years. But as the work was sort of just felt really, you know, it's really hard work. And it remains really hard work when you're getting ready for events and shows and exhibitions and deadlines. But the satisfaction is very different, very different.
So you were his first apprentice?
I was his first apprentice, and I sort of think that I got, you know, by the time I finished with him, he needed somebody who knew more about clay, because I knew very little. So it was, you know, it was a standing start education.
Yeah.
You know, but he needed people who knew what they were doing, and so his subsequent apprentices had more of a ceramic background than I did. So I feel like, you know, I lucked out, you know, big time, really, 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 really.
Oh, that's okay, you know.
Someone
was going to luck out. So.
Well, you know, it's sort of it's weird how life gives you these things. You know, I feel serendipity means something to me now in a way that I never felt there was much serendipity in my life as an actor. You know, but there is with this.
Yeah. So 2 years.
2 years, yep.
Him.
And then I sublet space from him for a year. So, and that was very interesting because I'm a youngest child and I'd never had anybody supplant me in a sibling, you know, start to finish.
Yeah.
And so when he got a new apprentice, and it was hard for me to admit it, but I thought, okay.
No.
Oh, there's somebody else here now, you know, and it's just, it was interesting. It was interesting to have that, you know. You might not want to keep that bit, but you know, it's sort of
be like I was being.
Yeah, you know, but it's interesting, isn't it? Sort of, you know, how old was I then? I was 37 by then, and still feeling like a child as well. You know, it's sort of a.
But we do carry our inner child with us.
Absolutely,
you know.
Absolutely.
I act like an only child, as my husband likes to remind me.
Oh, really? You are an only child, then, are you?
Well, yeah, kind of. I've got half siblings, but I was sort of raised as an only child, and so
it makes a difference.
You know, yeah, it does. Whereas my husband is an older sibling, and that comes through in how he is.
Yeah.
And it's funny, isn't it? But so you learned, as you said, not just the actual making, but also how to conduct a professional practice.
Watching that from the sidelines was incredibly useful.
Yeah, and so how does that influence how you put out your work now and who you put it out to?
Well, seeing them, they both did this thing called Chelsea Craft Fair, and I thought, well, I have to apply for that because that's an important thing to do. And, you know, and I got into that. And, you know, when I'd have my open studio, it would be friends that came because it was the first time. And Edmund very kindly put some people on his mailing list to let them know about it. So people came and I sold some work, and I stopped being a waiter at the end of my first year of apprenticeship.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Because I made a little bit of stash. And, but so it was being led by example, really. And, you know, and galleries would come to the studio, and so I would meet people. And so what I did was, towards the end of my apprenticeship, I went round as the betterware man. So I had a box of pots, and I delivered work for Edmund.
Yeah.
And I would speak to the gallery and say, look, would you take a look at my work? So that got it into three. So I went to Knaresborough, European Ceramics, with Maggie up there. And then I went to Manchester Royal Exchange, where they had a craft shop in the theatre, and Blue Coat Display Centre. So I went to those three places delivering his work, and I took my work as well. And that led to a bit of work going into a gallery. And the first place I ever sold work to was a gallery called Primavera in Cambridge, because Ronald Pyle, who was running it at the time, came to visit Edmund and liked the espresso cups. And he said, can I have 12?
Great.
And they were selling for £9, I think, at the time. And I delivered them by car, which was, a bit mad, but it was such an important thing to get into a really good gallery like that with 12 small cups. It was sort of, there were markers, there were things that shifted perspective on it.
Yeah.
And doing Chelsea for the first time, where you suddenly, there are more people and your mailing list goes up. All of those opportunities really help in terms of the movement of a business.
Yeah.
It's...
Yeah. So then soon after that, that's when you had that, I guess, another serendipitous thing with that landlord who gave you
absolutely,
a discounted space.
And I always thought I wanted a door between the two studios.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen. And I got in here into this studio and I shut the door on the first day and went, oh, I'm so glad there's not another door. Because, it's sort of, you take ownership of it. Yeah. And I mean, it was a bit, it's a big thing. You're taking on responsibility for rent, bills, so which means it's got to work.
Yeah. And so then you work in a few galleries and
it starts to build a bit.
It starts to build. Have you ever done something where your role was more a designer than a maker?
Yeah, I mean, sort of, the example of that for me is I did work with industry once. I worked with Habitat. Okay. So I ended up doing a dinnerware range for them. Cool. I got an email towards the end of 2004, near Christmas, saying we're looking to brief a designer, maker, to design a 15 to 20 piece Japanese inspired dinnerware range.
Okay.
And you go, okay. And I never thought about working with industry. And me and my partner and our little boy at the time, we got ill. And so I didn't follow up on it beyond acknowledging and then they got back and said, are you interested in this? And I said, oh, okay, yeah. And they said, come in.
Did they get in touch specifically with you?
Lots of people. It was a general thing. And when I saw their mood board, when I went to chat to them about it, I saw other people's work who I knew. So, you knew they were casting the net quite wide. And I went in with some work. And sometimes as an actor, I got a sense that things were going okay in an audition. And with Habitat, I thought, this is going quite well. And they nipped out of the room where we were and came back in and said, we'd like to offer it to you.
Oh, wow. So it was that quick.
It was that quick.
Instant.
And I said, okay. I said, well, there are a couple of people I'd like to talk to about this, really. Because, I never, studio potter, industry.
But I like that. You've got this big company coming to you and saying you want to offer it, and you took a moment. I did not. I couldn't say yes immediately. I did ask them when they wanted a response, and they said tomorrow morning. Ooh, okay.
So they didn't give me a lot of time. So you go, there's a bit of pressure here. But so I spoke to Edmund, and he said the mass market, fantastic.
Okay.
And I spoke to Julian, and he said
he wasn't opposed to that.
He wasn't opposed to it.
Right.
And then Julian said it's something he'd always wanted to do.
Wow.
And my decision was based on the fact that I could say yes and screw it up, or I could say no and never know. Never know what might be. So I did say yes, and that started the process of what became sort of like 4 months of work. And negotiation. I said I will have to make things because I don't draw. So I will make things, and we will respond. You will respond to those, and then I will remake things.
Okay.
So that would be the to and fro between us. So it wasn't about technical drawing. And they said, well, that's quite good because the factory will find it easier to respond to an actual object than interpreting a two-dimensional drawing. So that's the way we worked. And so I made stuff, and stuff was decided upon quite early for some of the pieces. So, I did espresso cup, I did bigger mug. I had to do square plates. That was interesting because I ended up throwing 50 centimetre square plates that I could cut into a square that would fire to 30 centimetres square plates.
Right.
So technically, that was a thing I hadn't been thinking about at all.
Right.
So it pushed me technically, it pushed me demand-wise, meetings. But the reason I think it worked, or one of the reasons it worked, was we have very clear communication. The person who was the head of tabletop, Florence Ballanon, a French woman, she would send an email after we'd had a meeting, and I would then respond to that email. And she said, we'll see this next time we meet. And I'd say, you will see it, but it won't be fired because there isn't time for me to dry it and fire it. So you will see it like this. So it's all very, I would respond, it was very clear. And so we knew what we were expecting at the next meeting. And so by May, I mean, the other thing, they talked about having it made in China or Portugal. And one of the guys on the team, he said, we can't do that. We're calling it a Japanese-inspired range. And if you turn it over and it says made in China, it's not sending the right message.
No.
So they chose a factory in Japan. And I think my reward for coming in on time and things like that was to get taken to Japan. So they took me to Japan. So we went to the factory, had a few days with Florence over there. And what was so interesting about it, we saw their first offerings.
That must have been surreal for you to walk into a factory where they're making your design.
You know, they were just doing the prototypes, but just being in a factory, what I loved was about the fact that there was stuff being done by machine and stuff being done by hand.
Okay, so you got to see which parts were...
Yeah. And they said, can we... I'd made it with a slightly flared foot, and they said, can we straighten that foot? Because then we can slip cast it. And I went, of course. You know, I wasn't in the business of going, no, my ideas.
I like the fact that they were checking, because I think sometimes, you know, having a partnership with, you know, an industry partner, I think that can be scary because it can feel like, oh, it's me as a maker, just that one person, versus it could be like an army of people who are just going to take over and take control away. And, you know, I'm sure that some companies would, but I like the fact that you're saying that they were checking in with you. And
they were very respectful. It was, you know, it worked well. And, you know, they allowed me to name the range, which was really nice. And it worked. It worked. And going into, they had a store on Regent Street, which was an old cinema. And that's where they launched it from. And it was terribly exciting. You know, I make things by hand, but I do love it when everything's the same as well. You know, there is something delightful about a stack of them, you know. And they put my name on the back of the bigger pieces as well. So it was definitely a win-win. And there was a nice bit of money right at the beginning for the first tranche. And it was in the stores for about 3 years, I think. It went in 2006, I think, ultimately.
Yeah.
And then ran till 2009.
Have you ever done something like that since?
No, I haven't. We started another project, but it didn't go all the way, really, and that was their colours. I mean, they used, with the range that I did for them, they did use the Tenmoku, they did use the Celadon, they used some of my decoration techniques, but I wouldn't let them have everything. There was stuff that I would allow them to use. And it was never a matching set. It was always about a family of pieces. And I think that's one of the things I think about my work is that they all talk to each other, so they all sit quite happily, and that was something I took into the work for Habitat as well.
Yeah.
You know.
Would you ever want to do something like that again? Or?
I don't know. I don't know. It's sort of.
It's almost like it was such a good experience. So
you don't want to blight it with doing something terrible. I don't know. I sort of. It's not where my desire makes me go, that's something I must do again. You know.
Yeah, I'm trying to think at the opposite end of that, you know, where the very commercial end of things. What's a sort of more like emotional kind of maybe like site-specific installations where it's a more immediate response, I guess, to something.
Where the parameters are much looser and you can interpret it how you want. Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate. I think I use the word fortunate a lot in terms of what I do, but you know, I've had a couple of invitations. One invitation.
I do think I'm starting to think, gosh, he's incredibly modest. He sings serendipitous, lucky, da da da. Yeah. It comes to a point where you're sort of like, well, if it keeps happening, maybe it's just because
maybe the work's
you're
okay,
a good and talented person, and you're putting out into the world and getting back from it. You know?
Yeah. I think it's the actor that's going, you know, no, you don't want me for this, you know. Well, it's sort of, it's not discomfort, actually. It's not discomfort. It's just, it's when things happen that you can build on. It is very fortunate. Nobody tells me what to do now. And nobody told me what to do before, but it's just, nothing happened. I am the business. I don't have an apprenticeship. We've had a few assistants over the time, but I'm a bit too controlling, I think, really. I like to hold on to it, and I couldn't let somebody decorate the work because that's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
Marks I make are the marks I make. But in terms of site-specific stuff, I was invited by a little craft collective called 6040. Tracy Rowledge, Claire Toomey and David Clark, 3 fantastic makers. And they'd done a thing at this place called Siobhan Davies Dance Studios, and they invited me and a couple of other makers to respond to the building and what happened in the building. So it's a dance studio. And they said I didn't have to use clay. I could, do whatever I wanted. And I didn't have to do what I normally do. Slightly circuitously, I came back to I will work with clay. And what I'll do with that clay is I'll make things that are non-functional, things that don't have a purpose.
Which is a departure for you.
Absolutely.
Because you said you want things that are functional.
So I made enclosed forms, columns, cones and spheres. And I did do one drawing of a surface with columns, cones and spheres on it before I started making the project. But when I actually made the objects, and they were all on the one surface, all on the flat surface, and I made them and I went, oh, that could sit on that. Oh, and then that could sit on that, and that could lie down next to that. And suddenly this whole thing opened up for me. And I used colours from the building, so colours from the green room, fabrics and things like that. So I used slip. And so it's all new. It was all absolutely. It was a very fresh thing. And then I had a cupboard made, and I called the piece Continuing Drama, which is what BAFTA calls a soap opera, because they can't call it a soap opera, awards for soap opera. And so basically I had 25 characters sitting in a cupboard, and the invitation to the audience was to open the cupboard, take out the pieces they want and make a display on top, shut the cupboard, and I had a camera set up opposite, and there was a remote button on the camera, and they could take a picture of their installation, and then somebody else could come along and do another one.
So it's almost like a stop motion thing by the end.
Well, you could run it like that because it was all in one space. I'd never done that, actually. I've never run them all, but it was up for 4 months. And there are 800 images in the bank of images.
Wow.
And there was one particular image which I loved, and people had made a tower that was about that high. So like 3 towers, one next to each other.
That's anxiety.
No, but when I saw it, I just laughed. But I thought if I'd been there when they're done, I'd be going, okay, what are you doing that for? It's sort of because it was just mad. But I loved it. People played and they did,
Any breakage?
None. And I'd given them a box of spares to do it. I'd given them some spares to do it.
I like that. That's really cool.
It was really, it was a lovely thing and a gift of an opportunity, really. And then the other one that happened was that there was I did a show. Karina and I have been sharing the studio since 2003, and right at the beginning of 2004, we were both invited to show at a house called Blackwell, which is an arts and crafts house on the banks of the Lake District.
Oh, wonderful.
With Emmanuel Cooper. It was a 3-person show. Really lovely to be showing with Emmanuel Cooper, for Christ's sakes, amazing. Karina and I went up for the opening, and I'd never been anywhere. This was the most beautiful arts and crafts house built in 1900s. Fabulous spaces, fabulous light, grass going down to the edge of the lake. It's quite away from the lake, but stunning place. And scroll forward. So we did the show, and that was really nice. And then I supplied the shop, with work over the next few years. And then in 2016, a thing came out from the CPA, Craft Potters Association, the Headley Trust, and Blackwell, and they were inviting somebody to apply for a residency there to make a show. And I thought, okay, this is Chris Keenan's name is on this. It's got to be. And so I applied for it. And on my application, the first line of my application was, "In another life, Blackwell is my house."
Oh, I like that.
And I talked about my connection with it and what I loved about it. And then I had a phone interview. 3 people were phone interviewed to get the thing.
Okay, yeah.
And I secured the residency, and so that enabled me to again play that element of play, because there's work drives on and you've got to fulfill exhibitions and things like that, but having the chance to play is a wonderful thing. And I did basically my gamut. So I did a bit of interactive, which is like continuing drama. I did installations, I did functional, and I did a bit of 2D. I took some images, I took loads of images and then sort of played with them a bit and had them on a wall. So it's a great thing. And, you know, I learned about the architect and the spaces there and, you know, what were his concerns, and I tried to talk to those in the work I made, and the family that built it. There was a Manchester brewing family, and they used it as their summer house, for God's sake. This fabulous place, it was their summer house. But they used it until 1917, when their eldest son was killed in the First World War at the age of 33. And so I made a piece for him, which had 33 elements to it. You know, it was lovely to be able to get that bit of information and put it in there, think about that. It was, you know, for me, it's the best thing I've ever done. It's the best thing I've ever done.
Really?
Yeah, you know, it was a real peak, I think. You know, that'd be nice. It'd be nice to have another one of those along the line some point.
Another residency with somewhere that you really resonate with.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I have to say, what really comes across for me actually is you have a sort of like almost like a fearlessness, I think, or like a confidence. I don't know if it's like in yourself or of like conviction or something, but like every single one of these like pivotal things that has happened, you've described it as you just going all in, you know, of just, you know, that letter to Edmund, even just buying the pots from him, you know, what was the other one? The habitat thing.
You're saying yes to that.
And the residency, you know, the way you apply it, but also the way you're like super, like still being lovely, you know, you're not being arrogant, but you are being very confident in saying, in another life, this is my house. You know, it's just such a bold statement.
But it was the truth, though.
It's
you
like
know, that's the thing.
Seizing the moment. I feel like that would be, you seize the moment. You know how to seize the moment, and I love that. I think that's a great way to live a life.
It doesn't feel like that from the inside. No, it's, you know, it's that thing about when you analyze it and take those moments.
Yeah.
But sort of, there are so many other moments which aren't about that.
Yeah, and maybe you're not telling me about all the stories of like times you applied for something and it didn't work or whatever. Maybe there's that sort of bias.
That level too.
I'm telling you about the best moments, but that's how it's. And I guess actually it ties into my next question, which I was going to ask you about. You took some time off recently.
Oh, yeah.
And again, that's a very confident thing to do as a maker, as a freelancer, to be like, yeah, I'm going to take some time off now.
Well, taking time off was interesting. You know, I'm 64 now, and I think I started thinking about the need for a break sort of during COVID, really, when, you know, I sort of thought about, well, what's, you know, I was 60 during the lockdown, a very small celebration.
Yeah.
You know. But I think it was Battenberg in a little park close to us. Marvelous. And I thought about ambition during that time, and what is ambition, and do you need to be young to be ambitious? You know, I could see myself as an older person. Right. And then I thought,
gosh, that birthday really hit you.
Well, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful thing. You know, a film had been put together of people sort of wishing me happy birthday, and that was incredibly moving for me. But I mean, it didn't slam me hard. But you what's the point in getting older if you're not going to reflect?
Yeah.
About the past as well as the future, you know. And so the idea of taking time off came out of the idea that, you know, 15 years of good making left if I keep my health. That'll take me to 80 virtually.
Yeah.
What do I want those years to be about?
And I know some makers who are, in their 80s and
it's still working. Yeah, exactly.
But you do need to pace yourself and look after yourself to be able to do that.
Absolutely. And so I thought, I can't, it's that thing about when you're working, your mind can't think, my mind can't think more broadly about things. So I thought, if I take 6 months off, then maybe I'll have an idea about what I want to do. And my mum had died during COVID and there was a bit of money, and I thought that'll be what I'll use the money for. I'll fund not working. And I didn't apply for something I've applied for 20 odd years, because I thought if I don't apply, then there'll be no decision to make about whether I do it or not if I were to be accepted. So that was good. So the diary was clear. I had to do my tax at the beginning of the year. And then I was struck by a thing about, I don't know how to do a sabbatical. How do you do a sabbatical? Where's the book on doing sabbaticals? Yeah. And then it was at the Guild. I was chatting to Olivia Horsfall-Turner, and she said to me, "You're fallow." And I thought, perfect. That's absolutely perfect as a word, because it was the thing about, I'm just regenerating. Not like Doctor Who, I'm just regenerating. And it was, and then I started to enjoy it. And what's, you can't legislate for how things are. I didn't really think about work. I really switched off completely. I went to exhibitions, I went to the movies, I cooked, I ate, I read, I dozed, I did some family research. But
was that just not the loveliest thing?
It was lovely, to get up in the morning and go, I haven't got to go to the studio today. There's nothing impending. I knew that.
But that's also, you love what you do.
I do.
And I think that's a wonderful thing to talk about, that you can love what you do, but you can also want time away from it.
You can love not doing it.
Yeah.
And I knew that I had some teaching at the end of June, so I knew that there was a definite end point. Sort of towards May, I thought, I should have maybe chosen a year. And I knew I had 2 shows later in the year. And when I came back, I did the teaching. I did come back and do a couple of days throwing, because I thought I can't go and teach without having thrown at all. I need to be able to do what I do.
Warm up.
Yeah, warm up. yeah, I'm warming up. And then I came back and it was marvellous. I loved it. And, I thought I was a bit trepidatious, because not having done it, and I'd eventually loved the time off. And I came back and I just bloody loved it, being back at the wheel. And I felt I was better. Things had shifted. I found that a couple of times when you have a enforced idleness, that something happened between here and here that connects it better, which is, very, it'd be interesting to have it scientifically tested, but I feel that it's true. I feel it's true that sort of, that my hands had a capability through rest. So it was lovely to come back and be at the wheel again.
Yeah.
I went really quiet when you said that you were able to do this because your mum passed away, and I'm sorry for your loss. But the reason why I went quiet and why that really resonated with me is because my mum also passed away.
During COVID?
Yeah, 3 years ago. So,
okay.
And actually in 2 days' time, it'll be 3 years to the day. And I guess similar to you, I'm only able to do this because I was also left some money. And
choices.
Choices.
And it's choices that come about because of something awful.
Yeah.
And about loss.
Yeah.
But
I can feel it. My voice has changed. But yeah, it's
so interesting.
I decided to take a risk with it, I guess, and do something that I feel she would be very encouraging of, because she was a very creative person, but she never really fully let herself engage with her creativity.
Okay. Did she make?
And she did. She tried to, I guess. She just was, plagued with bad mental health her entire life.
Okay.
And so it was kind of, she never really was allowed to really like blossom into who she could have been because she was held back by that. And so I thought, I think once I'd sort of like grieved her, it was then like, well, what do I do now? Because you're right, I think COVID and then losing someone like that, it sort of recalibrates, what is the meaning of life? And I lost a good friend as well at that time. And I think sort of in some ways it was the losing the friend that was more important than losing my mum. Because of the contact, the level of contact I had with that person. But you have to rethink things. And I feel really lucky that I got to the age I was. You're quite a bit younger than me. And to lose your parent at that age, where there's still so much more that you have to give each other and learn about each other. That's really hard. And I got to the age I was before loss slammed me between the eyes. But I think also for me was the fact that I guess she was same generation as you, so she died when she was 59.
Okay.
And so is that moment of realization. I know, sorry. But there's that realization of like, we all like work so that we can retire, but like she never got there. So it for me was that thing of like, well, I really want to be mindful of doing something that I'm really passionate about, and that I wake up every day and I'm very excited to do it. And I was already on that journey, I was already in the art world, but it was like that extra step and freedom of like, okay, like now let's make something that's my own, as you have. And
bold decisions, as you said.
I guess so. Well, so this is turning into a therapy
session. It's so interesting, isn't it? Sort of how conversations. I had a chat with an artist over the open studio, and we went to places I would never have thought that we'd have got to.
I didn't think we were going there today. That is not what we.
But it's it's an entire picture, and to try and to take the making out of the life. That's what I love, is that sort of, what this has given me, what making has given me is people. It's given me people I would never have come into contact with if it hadn't been for this thing that I do. And, that thing about the two lives coming together, we wouldn't be here without that. But the thing about the two things coming together is that I remember being at a fair once, and there was chap who was helping somebody else, and he was standing next to me, and I just said to him, I said, do you enjoy being with your work? And he said, I hate it. I thought, oh shit, that's really difficult, because the thing is, for me, having been an actor, where it's my height, my voice, all of these things are reasons I will or won't get a job. Now I have this thing that is entirely me, but it's outside of me. And I find it a very easy deal to be with that work. I don't look at, because I'm the thing that's been accepted or rejected as an actor. Whereas you can walk past my work. It doesn't affect me in the same way. It's sort of, it's the whole thing. It all adds up. To the 6th of December 2024, when we're sitting here. And who knows what will happen in 2025? There's so much stuff still to happen. And, holding on to it and keeping that passion, keeping that sense of inquiry about what you do, I remember when we first met outside the Guild doing the door on a sunny morning, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. I think it was like for
London. It was Craft Week or something like that, wasn't it? Yeah, we'd volunteered and we were doing that. And here we are
funny,
today.
Isn't it? Yeah. So.
Sorry.
No, I love it. I love that we've gone in a new direction.
Gone rogue.
Gone
off piste.
Yeah, it's great. And this is, what this is about.
Yep.
But just to kind of round things up,
sure.
What do you have coming up?
Okay, so that thing I said I didn't apply for, after having applied for X number of years.
Yeah.
I applied for it, and I heard at the end of last week that I got into it. So that's Ceramic Art London,
That's
happening
great.
at Olympia. And
so
it's a big
isn't
ceramic
that
show.
just a lesson that you can have something great and you can step away from it if you need to, and you can come back and they'll still
and
be
try
there.
again. Yeah.
That's
You know, I mean, that's the other thing. So you take time off, and you know, and COVID did it as well. Nobody needed a pot during COVID. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of.
I did. That's when I started collecting.
Okay, well there you go then. Oh, you've just shot my theory in flames there.
I'm
you know,
so sorry.
It's, no, but you know, it's sort of. I didn't feel an imperative to make at that point in my life
Yeah.
for various reasons. You know.
Yeah.
But so that's coming up, and I've got a show in St Ives later in the year. Got yet to set the dates on that. So there's stuff, and maybe the thing that I should do is open an online shop. But that's quite an ask for me, because I'm not that great on the socials and all of that sort of thing. I'm very
Something
I find
to.
it hard work.
Yeah.
I'm really worried about. I'll say what I do is, if I'm going to post on Instagram, I write it out as a Word document that I send to myself, that I then copy, because I just think I'm going to hit the keys and send it and it'll be wrong. You know.
I write emails to myself actually.
Do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just write it in an email. and
Okay.
then
Oh, that's a
copy
quicker
paste.
way. I would think of that.
I do that because I just find it easier. I can sit with it, like not
Yeah.
every post, but as in
Yeah.
if I want to do something where I'm being a bit more reflective, etc., and I want to dig a little bit deeper, then I will sort of like have it as a draft, and then when I'm ready, I sort of send it to
And
myself.
tweak it a bit, maybe.
Yeah, and then things like that. So there you go, something to think about, mull over.
Yeah, definitely. But you know, pots will be made next year.
Yeah,
It'll happen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eleanor. It's been interesting. You know. I hope it's been interesting.
You will be able to find Chris's work at Ceramic Art London at Olympia in early May. I really encourage you to go. And do comment below if you'd like to also encourage Chris to start an online shop. Thank you for watching. It means a lot, especially as at this moment, the channel is entirely self-funded. So please spread the word. You know how. Like, share, and subscribe. See you next week.
I went for it.
That shot some air around.
So that was decisive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi. I know, kind of break the ice a little bit.
Yeah.